The Dallas Cowboys beat the Detroit Lions in Week 17. But how should you feel after that win? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on Cowboys. Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Landon, the Cowboys got a convincing 20-19 win over the Lions in Week 17. Just generally, how are you feeling coming out of that win?
I mean, I'm feeling good. I don't know how Detroit fans are feeling, but I feel. Look, I hate that we're that all of this is going on. Kind of talking about the last few minutes sequence when, Dak Prescott had such an incredible game. CeeDee Lamb had a record-breaking game, to say the least,
which we'll get to.
I hate that the discourse has turned into the penalty stuff exclusively, simply because we have been talking about it all season long, and no one has ever come to our aid about it. So, we'll talk about that whole sequence. But to me, I think that if you go and you look at the game, there was just so many things that didn't go the Cowboys' way. That just the ball didn't bounce, the CD fumbling the ball through the back of the end zone, so many things that ball bouncing the wrong way sort of things, right? And the Cowboys were able to pull this win out despite every opportunity trying to go against them. I have some issues about some of the aspects of some of the play. I'd like to see the defense kind of continue to stiffen up at the end of this game, but I mean, it's hard to get upset with the defense that allowed only 19 points against the Detroit Lions team when we were
forced multiple turnovers.
That's right. It's like, and for the offense, it's like, there's a couple boneheaded plays for sure, but overall, like, they were pretty successful as well. I just think that the scoreboard itself didn't quite reflect the game because of just all the weirdness that happened.
I agree. I think for the most part, you should be encouraged. I mean, we'll talk about CD. Dak played a really good game. To me, the thing that's a little bit concerning is like the situation part of football. And like the 2nd and 14 pass that the Cowboys had. And we can talk about whether they should even have been in that situation. And Dak talked about it after game. Like he should have tried to make that throw on 2nd and 14. He was just being too aggressive.
Yeah.
That gave Detroit an additional 40 seconds to have a chance to win this game at the end. And then for the second straight week, the Cowboys defense is put on the field for, they have the lead. They just have to get a stop in order to win the game. And they give up a 75-yard touchdown drive in like a minute and 20 seconds without Detroit ever going out of bounds and without Detroit ever having to use a timeout. That's the part that I'm a little bit concerned about. This is now back-to-back weeks that the Cowboys have kind of messed up situational football.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's certainly true. But the good news is they went 1 for 3 on 2-point conversions. So,
well, that's the thing. It's like, okay, obviously that the first 2-point situation was whatever. They got the stop on 2nd down, but Micah Parsons jumps off sides. That could have been a game-changing penalty.
Game-losing penalty.
Game-losing penalty. They get the stop. They have the Lions. It's on the 7-yard line, which I don't know why Dan Campbell decided to go from the 7.
That was idiocy. That's just being stubborn at that point.
Basically, it's a pre-snap penalty. You get a pre-snap penalty that gives Detroit another chance to win this game. I think that's the concerning thing for me, Landon, is as you get into the playoffs, your margin for error is just a lot smaller. And it seems like over the last couple of weeks, we've seen some of this stuff pop up.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I'm necessarily going to be calling it a trend, but it certainly has popped up, and I certainly think that it's something to keep an eye on as we move forward. But Yeah, I mean, I think that's the frustrating thing about the performance of the defense overall is that you played so well for both 3.5 quarters of the game, and really you just give up like two big drives, I
Yeah.
think probably total in the whole game. And so I think it was a good performance. It just leaves you wanting just a little
A
bit
little bit
more.
more. Yeah.
And I think again, I think that's the same with the offense too, where I think the offense played well for the vast majority. It's like, and then there's just the kind of the stupid things, right? Like the Dak interception was like his one bad throw of the game. Honestly, I agree with him on the 2nd and 14. I probably wouldn't have made that throw. That's a bad decision to make.
Yeah.
But I don't know about the play calling. We'll talk about all of that
Yeah.
specifically
Yeah.
here in a bit too.
Just really quickly, let's talk about that 2-point conversion. I just want your take. After kind of watching all the videos and stuff, what happened here?
Well, it seems to me that here's what I honestly believe happened is that they had spent the vast majority of the game making number 70 the eligible
Dan
receiver for
Skipper.
the game,
Yep.
Dan Skipper. I think that they were trying to set up a situation where they were going to misdirect, and Taylor Decker was going to be the surprise eligible receiver in that.
Yes.
I think the communication between the Detroit Lions players and the referees, and that could have been crowd noise, that could have been a number of things.
Well, you had 3 guys. It probably was confusing. Yes.
Yeah, it failed, and I don't know whether that was because he didn't hear, because of whatever. It does seem to me that 70 was announced as the eligible receiver.
We heard it through the
stadium.
PA. Yep, we heard it through the stadium.
So, and I think that should have been. I don't know what Detroit is supposed to do.
No.
I agree with that sort of aspect of it, but at the same time, like, if they had allowed that touchdown, even with everything that had happened, that's not any more fair to the Cowboys, because to the Cowboys defense, they were told that 70 was the eligible receiver. 68 was never announced as an eligible receiver.
And you saw that the way the Cowboys lined up. And actually, if you watch that video clip of Brad Allen after one of the Lions players reports is eligible, he goes right up to, I believe it's Damone Clark, and tells him in points 70 is eligible. And the way that the Cowboys lined up is they overloaded on the Lions' right side.
Yeah.
Left Taylor Decker
Mhm.
basically without anybody on him because he's just an offensive lineman. So just to be clear, I think the refs completely messed up and botched the whole situation. I'm not sure what the Lions are supposed to do about it. I think they were being a little bit cute, but I also think that's part of what they were trying to go for. So it's just a bad situation.
It's part of the reason that you don't the downside to doing those kind of calls, those kind of things where you have to like complicate things, or you use a weird motion that a ref is going to misinterpret as a false start, or you've got a formation that's off unbalanced, that you have to rely on there being solid communication between the players and the rest. Look, the Cowboys had the exact same thing happen to them earlier in the season, had a touchdown taken away from against Philadelphia. So honestly, I would feel bad for Detroit if we were not the 99% of the time the victims of this sort of thing.
Well,
and even the Peyton Hendershot thing really is. I mean, that's where we should be going, is way upstream, where we shouldn't even have been in this situation if they had properly called the tripping penalty on the person who attempted the tripping and not the person who was the victim of the tripping. This would have all been a moot point,
because the Cowboys would have had 2 options and both would have been great. It would have been either 2nd down and like 2 under the 2-minute warning, or the Cowboys would have had the ball 1st down and I think it might have been 1st down and goal at like the 10-yard line. Both of those put the Cowboys in really advantageous situations. Instead, it's 2nd and 14, or sorry, no, it was 2nd and 25, right?
2nd and 25. It was a personal foul. That's the thing that's really crazy about it. Yeah. So it's like, that was the thing that's really crazy. And ultimately it shouldn't have hurt them too much, because it did give them on the other side of the 2-minute warning. And so like they should have been able to run it out a little bit more. That's where the 2nd and 14 penalty kind of comes into play a little bit. I actually didn't have a problem with them throwing the football in that situation.
Just you can't be a YOLO ball down the sideline.
Exactly. You have to complete a short pass to just gain some positive yardage or run the ball, or
Yep.
quarterback sneak somewhere.
Or screen
You
or something like
yeah,
that.
you can't throw a high leverage, high chance. I mean, I understand what you're trying to do, Dak, but you're being too aggressive.
Yes.
The act of throwing the ball on 2nd and 14 under 2 minutes, that's aggressive enough.
Yes.
Don't try to double down and do a high leverage fade to the end zone where he's not likely to catch it.
All right, let's talk about CeeDee Lamb, who had a record-setting day in Week 17. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. It is the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS because it's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, all you have to do is pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. PrizePicks is the most fun that I've ever had playing DFS because there's so many different players and so many different stat projections to choose from. PrizePicks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match worth up to $100. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We want to let you know that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Landon, let's talk about CeeDee Lamb. We discussed on Friday that we thought this could potentially be a big CeeDee Lamb game because of a couple things. The Lions secondary is not very good. They're banged up. And CeeDee needed 180 yards to pass Michael Irvin's record. And we knew Michael Irvin would be in attendance. He had that record almost at halftime.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this was one of the best CeeDee games I've seen outside of dropping the ball at the 1 yard line because it could have been even bigger.
Yeah, this was the best CeeDee game. I think. I don't think we've seen anything like that before. I felt pretty confident that he was. I mean, we talked about it. I think we even called it that we thought that he would get the record. Not that it was just in shot, but I thought that he was pursuing to get the record because I thought he was going to get a bunch of targets. Lo and behold, he did. And I thought that he would have success, and he certainly did there. Outside of one other drop, I think that happened I think there was a sequence where he dropped a third and a fourth down pass, right? Or maybe it was a second and third down pass.
No, it was a second and third. There was Dak threw the ball way behind him on one where he would have easily got the first down. Then on the third down pass, Dak threw it high and kind of out in front of him with a linebacker right underneath. So I CeeDee kind of just stuck one arm up to try to catch it, but it was kind of a hospital ball a little bit.
Yeah. So outside of those, and then the obviously the fumble out of the end zone, those were the only kind of negative plays. I mean, he was just dominating. He was getting open at will on the 92-yard play. I mean, it was just a simple situation. Obviously, Dak, I think, had the tougher of the two jobs there. Breaking free of the pass rush, getting out of the end zone, and then kind of breaking loose to his right and just throwing to a spot. But great job by CeeDee to recognize immediately that Dak was in trouble, break the route back outside, having the defender fall down, and then just kind of over the shoulder catching. It was pretty easy after that. And then all the other throws. I mean, you're starting to see. I think the one thing that you started to see from CeeDee Lamb that maybe you hadn't seen in years previous is kind of a return to Oklahoma CeeDee Lamb in how his game is. He's just so much better with the ball in his hand, the yards after catch. He's just weaving through the secondary. They just they didn't really have an answer for CeeDee Lamb for any part of the game, and it was kind of at the point where I was just like, look, I mean, if you aren't trying to throw it to CeeDee Lamb on every single snap, I don't know why you're not, because they haven't shown any ability to kind of stop him or slow him down at all. I think if I remember correctly, he ended up close to like at a 60% success rate on like 17 targets. It's like,
which we thought about, like we talked about this on Friday. Like this is a game that we thought that CD could have 15, 16, 17 targets, and he did.
Yeah. So, I think he really showed you exactly why he's considered one of the top 3 receivers in football. There's been lots of arguments about which offensive lineman was covered and who was not covered. I'll tell you who definitely was not covered. That was 88. I mean, he was basically open all game, and Dak was able to find him, throughout the game, and it ended up with record breaking for the season, record breaking for the game. It was ultimately a kind of 2-man show for the Cowboys offense. Brandon Cooks, we should also mention, did a great job as kind of the alternate guy. I think John Oding tweeted it out. 11 of the 12 passing first downs the Cowboys achieved were between CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Cooks. So just really incredible as a duo. But obviously, we have to point out specifically CD, who just shattered all expectations in this game.
So CD's at just under 1,800 total yards from scrimmage this year. He's at 12 touchdowns, 10 receiving, 2 rushing. Is this the best Cowboys receiver they've had since Michael Irvin?
Yeah. I mean, I think the numbers point that out. I think you could obviously make it. I mean, the person that we have to talk about is Dez Bryant, obviously.
Or I mean, honestly, To like early 2007 To was pretty good.
Yeah, that's a good point. Man, it's tough.
I think the reason that I would go CD is just that you can build your entire offense around him. Like a perfect example is they had a 3rd down and like 9 late in this game when the Cowboys were trying. It was on the touchdown drive, a 3rd down and 9. He catches a pass over the middle, explosive play. On the very next play, he comes in motion and he takes the handoff and he gets you a nice big run to kind of continue that drive. You can move him all around the formation. He can be a vertical player. He can be after the catch. His first catch of the game, they ran just like an out route. He caught it, turned back upfield, and that was like a 42-yard gain. Like his ability just to be the entire offense is pretty incredible.
You could do some things to try to take Dez Bryant out of the game. Because he played on the outside. There's ways to kind of cloud him, to get doubles and stuff. You can do some of that stuff with CD in the slot, but it's a lot harder. The fact that you're able to move CD all over the formation, he can basically do anything. Maybe he's not the fade route player.
No, that's not his game. No.
He's not above the rim as much as Dez is. But he can still do that, and he can do a lot more. So I think, as far as a guy that you can reliably run your passing attack through, I would say he's the best, since a couple 88s ago.
We're going to talk about the offense all week long because I want to talk about the running game, which has just been miserable. But I will say one of the changes that I think we've seen from the Cowboys, at least in the second half of the season, is that they've just condensed their offense down in terms of the target. Like you look at like early in the year, like 9-10 guys were getting catches. In this one, 17 targets for CeeDee Lamb, 8 for Brandon Cooks, 6 for Jake Ferguson, and then no other receiver or tight end got more than 1. I mean, it's basically those 3 guys handling all of the work in the passing game. Now that might be a problem down the road, but I do think it helps with Dak being in a rhythm, just knowing, hey, I've got these 3 guys that I know are going to get open and are going to catch the ball. I feel comfortable throwing it to them.
Well, I don't think it's going to be a problem down the road because I think that this team has shown that they can do that. They've had a lot of different games where they've had multiple receivers when they've needed to. I just think what this has shown is that when they need to, when they feel like they have to condense it down to just the folks that they know are their playmakers, that they can operate that way as well. That they don't need to just be a distribute offense. They can be an offense that is feeding their stars and still win that way as well.
I think the next progression of this offense is trying to find that consistent 4th guy, whether that's Jalen Tolbert. I don't want to say it's going to be Michael Gallup anymore because Gallup didn't even earn a target yesterday. I don't know if you're watching, but Gallup hardly played at all yesterday. But that's the next step, finding that fourth guy who's just can get 3 or 4 targets a game to make this offense a little bit more consistent. We've got all week to talk about that side of the ball. Let's talk about the Cowboys defense, who had kind of an up and down day. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL regular season is wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That is $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is so easy to use, and there's so many different ways to bet, like live same-game parlays. You can find bets in the new Explore tab, or you can make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, the best way to find popular parlays, and so much more. You guys know how much I love the futures market. Still, you can go bet on those as well. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Everydayers, on tomorrow's show, we're going to be breaking down some of the All-22 film for this Cowboys big Week 17 win, convincing win over the Lions. I do want to talk about the defense because I thought for the most part, they played really well. Like if you told me that going into this game that the Cowboys were going to hold the Lions to 19 points, they were going to force 2 turnovers, they were going to have, so I think it was 2 4th downs that they stopped them on. You would have taken it, but I just think that last drive leaves a little bit of a sour taste in your mouth.
Yeah, but look, I totally understand that, and I think that's human nature. But I do think that it's important to kind of recognize that the Cowboys' offense did a pretty decent job. In fact, a very decent job. I mean, you look at the numbers of the success rate that Detroit had on 3rd downs. Just the numbers for Jared Goff overall, honestly, were just not great. And I think that they had some rushing success, but that's Detroit. They are one of the best running teams in football. They have maybe one of the best run blocking offensive lines in football outside of Philadelphia. I think the Cowboys held them to like something under a yard under their average per carry. So I think that they had to rely on some big plays. They had to rely on DeMarcus Lawrence having maybe the best game he's ever played. In some
ways.
Lions
fans hate DeMarcus Lawrence? How many
I tweeted that out, man. They just must be so sick of him. They just must hate DeMarcus Lawrence, and I feel bad for you, son. But I guess the truth of the matter is that when the Cowboys defense needed to make big plays, they did, except for that last drive. You needed them to kind of find a way to get off the field, and I think that they just did not handle that 2-minute offense very well. But again, I will submit to you that Ben Johnson is maybe the best play caller in all of football. Like, he's going to be a head coach next year somewhere. Because of his play calling ability, and the Cowboys, for the most part, were able to kind of keep this offense, in the barn. So it is kind of a mixed results thing. I mean, honestly, it's a lot how you feel about the offense, right? It's like you make a couple of pretty serious mistakes with the offense. It's like fumbling it out of the end zone. It's like a
turnover in the red zone. Right?
Turnover in the red zone. It's for the defense. It's like Jameson letting Jameson lose for a 63-yard touchdown. It's it's just a couple of these, Micah getting offsides on that second 2-point conversion. It's I think if they're able, sometimes when you play good teams, you press and you make mistakes. They have got to find a way to further limit that, pressing to the point of making mistakes. Look, are there gonna be calls like what happened with Detroit in the two-point conversion? What happened with the Cowboys with Hendershot getting called for tripping? Are those things going to happen? Absolutely. I think you've got to find a way to overcome that and win these games. And I think that's the positive takeaway here, is that, look, you could say what you want about the way the 2-point conversions ended the game. At the end of the day, the Cowboys got 2 stops in the last 2 2-point conversions to win that. So they made plays when they needed to, even twice when they had to. So I think overall it's a positive review, but I definitely think there are things there that you're like, a couple things need to be better, especially end of game, end of half situations.
I will say one of the things that's very encouraging coming out of this game is this is the best game that I've seen Jordan Lewis play since 2018. That Saints game that they played when he just made a bunch of tackles on Alvin Kamara. He was awesome. And if the Cowboys have a legitimate good slot corner going into the playoffs, that's going to really help. It also helped Landon that Donovan Wilson played, I think, his best game of the season. And if you can get those guys back to playing at least an average level, I feel just much better about how they're going to fare in the playoffs. Stephon Gilmore, I thought was pretty good. It was not Deron Bland's best game, but for the most part, I thought the secondary held up pretty well.
Yeah, I didn't think Bland had a terrible game. I mean, again, you once again held a high-powered offense without a 100-yard receiver. I mean, the fact you're able to keep someone like Amon St. Brown without 100 yards, that's probably a pretty good sign that you had a good day.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think for the most part, the secondary played the way you wanted them to. I think the linebackers for the most part actually played pretty good. I mean, there was definitely, it seems chunky and you feel like, God, they're getting these big plays, but ultimately they weren't producing points. And so that's all you can ask for is that, look, they can get the yards, but if they're not ultimately producing points, then you're in a pretty good spot.
Yeah. So the Cowboys 11-5 after 16 games. They have one more game left against the Washington Commanders in Week 17. We'll see what that game means for the Cowboys. Obviously, Dallas is still going to play that one because they're still waiting on Philly to lose the game. Yeah, go ahead.
Before we forget, we should mention Tyler Smith, who did leave the game with the Liz Frank injury. It does sound like it was a full tear, which is good news, apparently.
Yes.
So apparently he's week to week. So he may even play this week, but they're hoping that he should be back at least for the playoffs.
My guess is Dallas is going to give him a week off.
I would say that they'd be dumb to play him. Even I think even if Philly were to lose this game, or either way, I think
you give them a full 2 weeks to get ready for the playoff game. But yeah, I think that was the only other injury they had in this game. So still relatively healthy, knock on wood, going into the final week of the season. Again, this is the third straight year. The Cowboys have won at least 11 games, right back into the playoffs, and should be a wild January for the Dallas Cowboys. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Go check out the show on YouTube. We post videos every single day over there. Go follow the podcast wherever you get your podcast. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosier, and we will see you right back here tomorrow. Happy New Year, everybody.